Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 12 of Vandals. We've gone worldwide. And by worldwide, I really just mean I drove about 3 hours east, and I'm currently at the beach. If the setup looks a bit different, that is why. That also explains why the background is different. I tried getting Sean in his tank. I really did. Sean, you can attest to it, but the guy wouldn't do it. He said he did not want to be a thirst trap for the people.
No, that's not at all what I said. I actually was saying that you would put me to shame, dude. I got a dad bod. Like you were just look at you. You're at the beach. You're cracking open cold ones.
I
You're in the
wanted you to
beach
join me.
house. Yeah, like look at this. Look at this caster life, man. You guys are just.
We're big living, bro.
uh,
Listen, before we get started, or before we get too far into this thing, we do have a tradition on this show where, if you guys have been watching for the last 11 episodes, at the beginning of every show, I ask my guest to hit a popular dance, right? At the very
shut
beginning
the
to open
fuck
up the
up.
show.
You don't do that shit. I was like, yo, there's no shot you got 11 people in esports to do that. There's just no way.
I tried so hard. Ladies and gentlemen, the man requires no introduction. It's Sean S. Gares. Sean, baby, thank you for joining the show. How are you?
Oh man, I'm doing good. I'm fucking stressed out as all shit because stuff going on in my personal life combined with the team, but I'm here. I'm good. I'm good.
We're gonna jump into a lot of the team stuff. And look, actually, let's just go ahead and do it. You've talked a lot about how the roster came to be, right? You put out a really dope video. If you guys haven't seen it, highly recommend you go and watch it. It explains both he and Dan's thinking on the pieces that were put together, on how the roster was built. It was very insightful. What I don't think, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but what I don't think has been as well advertised is for you particularly. Why 100 Thieves? Like, how did this project come to be for you individually? Did you have other offers at the time? Anything like that?
Uh so honestly it was like super serendipitous how I ended up on 100 Thieves. Basically like um I knew I wanted to move away from like casting and content creation and try out coaching. And I just didn't know like where to go. I had previously had a lot of conversations before signing with Gen G previously about coaching or GMing for several orgs in the scene. Like
Mm.
I think I was talking like Complexity. I was talking to Sentinels, 100 Thieves, like several orgs basically. Like
Yep.
I don't even remember all of them, but um and it never got like too deep into talks. But when I knew I wanted to go that route, I just sent out feelers, and the first one I sent was actually to 100 Thieves, and they were like, "Oh shit!" Like we were actually gonna move forward with like our positions that we haven't hired for in like 2 years, like the GM position,
Hmm.
and we were gonna do that like tomorrow. So you're actually very fortunate that you reached
Wow.
out to us right now, and I also sent out feelers to like a couple other orgs, and uh, honestly, it wasn't even that 100 Thieves gave me like the best offer, like money wise. They didn't,
Hmm.
but what they offered was just a lot of, I guess, control
Hmm.
and trust as far as like how the roster would operate and build. Like they definitely, the people on 100 Thieves, like the management side, definitely have a lot of opinions and had a lot of say, like in building the roster. Don't get me wrong, and they
Sure.
definitely influenced a lot of the decisions that myself, Dan, and Mike made. Um, but just the ability to come in and pick like 5 players that you want to coach for, and it wasn't like it's not it's not like necessarily we had like the pick of the litter, right? Like we're in the
Right.
middle of the VCT calendar year. VCT open qualifier, the first open qualifier started in like 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that from when we
Hmm.
signed. 4 weeks, I think. So like not many players are gonna want to leave their teams and come to like a fresh roster. So we really didn't, and we couldn't obviously pick up EMEA players because of the weird restrictions on bringing them over here with visas and all that other stuff. So when I say like we can just build the roster from scratch, like there's obviously limitations, but
Sure.
the ability to be able to pick people that I knew would work well with us as individuals and work well with the other people around them, that was like super special to me because I think something that was missing in North America before that was just that buy-in from the team perspective.
Mhm.
And like a lot of the teams are like patchwork put together, like someone's cut, next person's brought in, and the guard seemed like it was one of the only teams that was built in such a way where it was like five just mega grinders.
Yeah, from
And that's
scratch.
kind of
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of like what we were looking to accomplish here on 100 Thieves. So that's what really drew me in, if I'm being honest. Like
Yeah.
that whole aspect of being able to like mold these players, mold young players. Um, yeah,
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I wanted to ask you about that later on because I think a lot of people, myself included, are curious about the autonomy that you may or may not have. You mentioned it, and I think as an org, they've been very public about it. Nade has been very public about it too. Like the org is very passionate about Valorant, and they're very passionate
um,
about winning. So
yeah,
I was very curious to hear about from an autonomy perspective how much of that you had as you were building it out. But it sounds like in a lot of ways, while it was not a let's hand Sean, Dan, and Mike the keys and then look away, they did in a lot of ways still hand you the keys.
yeah. I mean, they definitely let us pick like a lot of pieces on the roster. They had like their ideas on like who we could bring in and
Yeah.
who we could keep, and it wasn't just like them just being like, "Yo, pick the roster," and they left the room kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I would have actually been alarmed if that were the case. So I'm kind of glad it wasn't that way.
Sure.
Then it's just like they don't give a shit at all. Uh, yeah, they definitely care a lot. Like I don't want to make it seem like they don't care a lot. No, there's separate chats where we talk with Nate and Jacob, and like we talk like high level stuff with the team. And there's a separate chat where like we're all with the team and we talk like day to day stuff. Um, yeah, it's a pretty good environment in that regard. Like, uh, I don't really know how else to expand on it.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure. 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 Well, let's transition over to this. I think as you think about Valorant and its landscape, it's a very young game. Um, Obviously, although in some areas it feels like we've been living for a long time.
Yeah.
But with that, and having gotten to pick your brain and known you for a little while, I think one of the things that has always stood out to me is the way that you think about the game, right? Because there are so many different philosophies and ways that players, coaches, analysts can think about the game and approach it. There is not a correct way, in my opinion, to think about the game and to play about it. Can you succinctly try to explain your approach and how you think about the game? Because we've already seen a variety of flavors from you and your boys already.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat as you where I don't think there's a correct way to play this game. I think there's wrong ways to play the game.
Hmm.
But I think in CS, I think I came from a place in CS where it was like honing your craft to try to like get as close as you can to the perfect game.
Sure.
Whereas in Valorant, I feel like it's like a tree and there's all these branches with possible different directions you can go, and they're all good choices.
Hmm.
Uh, as long as your coordination and synergy is on point and the comp you're playing against doesn't hard counter you and do what you're trying to do better,
Right.
right? There is not a perfect comp in this game in my eyes. There's not a perfect playstyle. There never will be. There's constant updates to the game, and there's always abilities that wash and counter certain other abilities. Um, I think what you're referring to, like the different styles, it's been really hard this first month. This guy just straight left. I'm just kidding, but um, it's been hard the first month or two, just because there's like there's a lot of thoughts I have in the game about like rotations and playing based off like how people move around the map,
Hmm.
but there's not enough time to really go into depth with those things based on our match schedule. Like,
Yeah.
uh, I feel weird because I keep bringing it up, but like the Knights thing was after 3 weeks. The Open qualifier was after like our fourth week. Open Qualifier 2 was on like our 5th week, and then our 6th week was playing VCT. You know, like there hasn't been an immense amount of time to add depth to our playbook
Mhm.
as opposed to like adding strats to beat the next team kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like it I can't wait to get focused on like the fundamentals of the game because I think there's a lot of things we can clean up. But when you focus on those things, you have to sacrifice in other areas. Like if we focused on
Sure.
fundamentals, we would sacrifice in strats or we would sacrifice in, you know, like comp changes and stuff like that that we're trying to pull off right now to get wins. So it's kind of a delicate balance right now in sacrificing a little bit of the long term for the short term because
Mm.
we're in VCT, whereas a lot of these teams had the benefit of probably having a base and having a core,
Yeah.
and they don't need to focus on those fundamentals as much. Uh, we're like kind of doing both at the same time right now
Yeah.
while playing these matches. Yeah.
Well, and I think you mentioned you don't like that you continue to bring it up, but it's a reality of the matter, and I think it's something that a lot of different teams and players have expressed. And it's the fact that yeah, the schedule is condensed. There's not a lot of time, and there is not a lot of room, especially if you're competing at a high level. You take teams like any team that played in Reykjavik, right, at Masters One. There's not a lot of time to get in the lab and scheme stuff out, right? There's a constant. You've got to be ready to deliver essentially week after week.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. I want to transition to Stellar. Let's talk about Stellar. You bring him in as one of your core pieces. He's calling for you. Can you tell me about a bit about his calling, the relationship, and maybe some of the guts between what that interaction looks like between you, Mike's, and Stellar?
Yeah, so it's it's changed a lot. Like that's what I'm saying. Like this has been a learning process for me as well as like Stellar and Mike's and Dan, right? Like I hadn't coached before. So the first week I came into the team, I wanted to see like how Stellar called and I wanted to give the floor to him to basically like go over strats and just get a feel for like how the team moved around. So I didn't even design anything for the first week, maybe even two.
Hmm.
Mike was actually the coach that was in the server during those times. I just like kind of observed. I gave criticisms. We have 2 hours of server side before the scrims where I was like heavily involved. I would jot down notes about like all the things that happened and give like uh, end of day kind of like recaps on like what we can improve. And then by the time like the third week rolled around for nights is when I started finally hopping in the servers because there's all these aspects of coaching that I just was blinded to, right? Like, um, I mean, everything from like Mike books scrims for us on Prac most of the time, which is like a website where you can book scrims. Uh, Sometimes at bootcamp I would do that, but there's also like being in the server. There's only one coach that can be in the server because there's 12 slots, one coach each team. So the way we're operating is like we privately stream to the other coach. And so now I'm usually the one doing that in the server, privately streaming to Mike. But at the start, it was Mike. And now going into your question with Stellar. So after like the first week or two of kind of giving the floor to him and like understanding how he called, I realized like he has like this very good sense of mid game and like kind of maneuvering people around the map. He comes from CS and that's where he really shines in my eyes is like pushing and pulling rotations and like feeling where the other team is in the middle of the round and making really good reads off of that. So I decided like the best way to win these matches was to like kind of give us some more structure in the early rounds and then let him take over in like the mid to late rounds. Um, and I think that's kind of like the vibe we've been going towards. But we've definitely been moving comps around a little bit to try to get people more comfortable in their roles. We've been moving even like roles around within those comps. Like last week before our TSM game, man, it was insane. But I'm sure we'll get to that later later on later on in here. But that week of practice was kind of crazy compared to the rest of them.
Well, yeah, we will go to that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I want to ask you about perception. You mentioned um, you know, the the passionate fan base that is Thieves, and the expectation for the team to perform, because it's a star-studded of a coaching and GM staff as you're probably ever going to come across, right? Like, let's be honest. So with that comes an expectation for delivering. And you take a look at how you guys opened your season and you obliterate the guard, right? And it was in a lot of ways, Sean, sometimes that was hard to watch, was how rough that looked, and how much you guys, how badly you guys beat them. And you fast forward a little bit. So prior to this past weekend with TSM, people are saying 100 Thieves are going to Copenhagen. And look, I was all aboard the hype train. I'm going to be honest with you. But then you look at the match against TSM, and in a lot of ways, it was very different. And we are going to talk about what went wrong against TSM. But what I want to know is the stocks have been in an emotional roller coaster, right? After the guard, you're going to the moon. After the loss against TSM, the stocks have plummeted. Where do you personally see this team today?
Yeah, that's a good question because we play super good in scrims. Like I I honestly think, like we have potential to be the best team in North America. I am not even joking when I say that, but it's early on right now,
Sure.
right? Like, and our players are a lot younger and they lack experience that a lot of these other top teams have. But once they get that experience, the the micro decisions I see them making in the chaotic moments are so good. Like they're so good at playing off of each other. They're so good at communicating. They're so good at keeping a positive energy going throughout the entire day. Um, when things go wrong, they're very quick to want to problem solve, and they don't blame. And
Which
these
is
are all
important, yeah.
very rare things when it
Yep.
comes to like FPS gamers. Like this is part of the reason why we chose these guys, right? Like that I think Valorant is more of a strategical problem solving game as opposed to just only worrying about like headshotting your opponents and like the best thing. Obviously our players are insanely skilled.
Right.
But they're also very good communicators and very good at like working with each other in chaotic, hectic moments. And they're comfortable. They talk to each other with good tones and like they keep positive energy. And I think all of those things are just as important as individual skill when it comes to like a team-based game like Valorant. So I think our ceiling is super high. I mean, that might just be me being really optimistic based on what I see on the day-to-day. I think there's still tons to work on, right? Like going over basically like all the things that took me years and years to learn as an in-game leader. Like I in the long term, I want the players to really be operating on, like that Astralis wavelength where it almost felt like when I watched Astralis, their individual decisions showed me that every player could have in-game led that team or in-game led like a tier 3 team. Like they could have been in-game leaders on an individual level, but they opted to group together as a team, and it made the sum of their parts way, way greater than their individual pieces.
Sure.
On those Astralis teams. And that's kind of like what my goal is here. And I think we're already showing flashes of that. But then there's times like the TSM game where like little things will happen in the game that we just haven't experienced yet. And we haven't had time to talk about because like I said, the match schedule has just been so insane. Like when you're constantly thinking about adding strats or changing comps for the next map, you don't have that much time to reflect on the mistakes you've made in the past and fix those. So we've been really up against the clock in that regard. So I mean, I didn't foresee it's weird because I guess I wasn't sure how successful we would be, right? Like out the gate. And I'm really pleased with how successful we have been. I'm not going to lie, especially in practice. Like we've been playing really, really well. But there's still a lot of areas that we can improve on. Like I keep saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the TSM match, right? Because I casted the TSM match that you guys had this past weekend, and obviously in preparation for that match, I spent a lot of time watching your film against the card.
Yeah.
Sean, in a lot of ways, you guys look like entirely different teams.
Yeah.
What what happened?
So it's weird. In the split game, we lost a couple. I mean, we did a VOD breakdown yesterday of that split game. So like, we lost so many silly rounds in the split game where we were in advantageous scenarios. We lost a couple like force buys on attack where there were communication lapses, and then on defense, I think we were giving up too much ground. Again, like we're a new team, and teams have yet to truly punish us in those ways. Uh, and there were things that I warned the players about, like being possibilities. But again, like it's kind of the delicate balance between trying to fix long-term problems versus like winning short-term,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they kind of took advantage of a lot of our flaws on split. And then on Haven, I think Haven comes down to ultimately like I'll take full blame for Haven because at the start of the week, I basically told the players, look, we're banning Ascent. Like, we're just not going to play TSM on Ascent again.
Mhm.
I didn't like what I saw the first time we played them. I don't even think we should have played them the first time on Ascent. So we're going to practice Haven and we're going to change our comp on Haven. And this is actually like the same approach we kind of used against the guard. And literally TSM took the bait in the same way the guard kind of did, right? Where I envisioned the guard picking bind. We changed our comp on bind in preparation for that. And it didn't seem like they were ready for us to play Sage on bind.
Yeah.
In the same way, I wanted to do that on Haven against TSM. And initially at the start of the week, we were actually running a Raze instead of Jet. And so Monday we were running a Raze instead of Jet. Tuesday we tried to do like the players wanted to role change within the same comp, which kind of like made our practice feel weird because
Yeah.
then people needed to learn new util sets on different agents. And then Wednesday, it was just like this kind of isn't working. We need to get off of Raze and go to Jet because of comfort.
Mhm.
And it kind of created like a little bit of like I don't want to say it was I think we can make any comp work, and that's why I was okay
Mhm.
with it. Um, I would much rather the players be comfortable than
Sure.
like jam a comp down their throat because I can draw up strats for whatever. But we just didn't get enough reps, is what happened, and we made some bad again like reads and rotations. But that's because we had Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the match was on Saturday and we technically only got 3 scrims in with that comp.
So it was a
Like,
preparation
and
thing at the end of the day.
yeah, it was definitely a preparation thing for Haven. Split was a totally different story, which is why I led with that.
Sure.
Uh, but yeah, so it's like I'm trying to balance right now, like changing comps too much, and like the player's comfort, the long term vision versus like the short term winning. And it's all a balance that I'm trying to learn.
Yeah.
And like I think everyone understood that after that TSM game. Those guys are definitely a really good opponent, though. Like I think people are sleeping on TSM.
Look good. Look really.
Yeah,
Um, when you come off of a loss like that, obviously there is whiplash, right? And there's reaction.
sure.
There's Reddit threads, all of that fun stuff. As a coach of a relatively young team, both in age and in the time you all have spent together, as you've alluded to a couple of times, how do you deal with the weighty expectations that come with donning the 100 Thieves banner?
Uh oh man, I don't know. After that loss, I didn't even look at the comments because I just know a lot of them are just so
Smart man.
ridiculous. Like they're just so ridiculous. Uh, I don't know. It is something that I'm still learning with this whole aspect of Valorant because people are super harsh, is what I've noticed. Like
Yep.
they're very quick to like jump on you, especially like the I wouldn't even call them like the 100 Thieves fans. There's like the 100 Thieves like haters, and then the 100 Thieves fans,
Hmm.
and it reminds me a little bit when I was on Cloud9 because we had that support, and whenever you have like insane support, you're gonna have haters as well.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously I welcome everyone because I think it's super fun to have that kind of polarization in esports. Um, but it definitely makes losing hard because I put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm sure the players obviously have put a lot of pressure on themselves too. And when you lose like that, it just feels like everything you tried to adjust. I don't want to say all your work in the last week was pointless because you definitely learned a lot. And, like you learned how to rotate, you learned how to play positions different, you learned how to do this and that, and you'll be better for the next week. But you know, there's not many jobs where at the end of the week you get like a check or an X,
Yep.
whether you like fail or succeed. But that's kind of like what this VCT format is like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was your last week of work worth it? No. Okay, back to the drawing board. Like that's kind of like what it was. It was like, that really stung. That hurt. We're gonna talk about it. It's okay. Losses happen. You know, it's it definitely hurts in the moment, but like you brush it off the next day and you're just back at it again.
Which
And I
is,
think
go ahead.
oh sorry, go. I was gonna say like the way I've always dealt with losses is they fucking suck. Like they feel
Yep.
terrible when you're playing in the server or whether you're coaching, whether you're involved in the team in any aspect, right? Like they hurt you to the core because it's like all you care about is winning in this game. That's like your entire purpose of your job is to win in this game.
Right.
And if you don't win in the game, it's like devastating. No matter what team you're on, no matter what your role is in that team, I can empathize with anyone on any team for that regard. But I think everyone has that mindset where like after they lose, they're like, holy fuck, I don't want to feel that ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we need to do to change to not feel that shit again? And like that's like my mindset, like the next like pretty much literally like that night of it's
Mm-hmm.
like you rub off the sadness and you're just like, man, I'm over this shit. Like, what can we do to not lose next week?
Yep.
And you're back to the drawing board.
I mean, that's the DNA of a competitor, right? Across the board, and in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, Sean, I think that is maybe one of the benefits to the condensed schedule, right? Like you don't have
Yeah.
time to mope about a loss because the real talk
True.
is you've got TSM next week, or you've got whoever it is who's waiting next week. There's no time to really be upset about it. Now look, we can talk about Asuna and we can talk about him on Sky and decision making and was there enough preparation and blah blah blah. But I want to ask you the hard hitting questions, okay? Let's get to the meat. How long until we see Asuna on Neon?
Neon. Oh wow. We actually. I mean, we gave him the option yesterday on one of the maps. I'm not even gonna lie. So
Well, this was not intended to be a real answer, but at this point, you've got to continue.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm gonna tell it how it is. Like, the reason why I guess because I am super bullish on like Neon, Yoru, like all these agents
My
that
man.
are like low pick rates. I love them, but I'm again, it's like hedging between like long term vision of like teaching fundamentals and short term, like can we draw up enough strats to like cheese this game win and then do it again next week on all of the maps, right? Like it's really like a fine line between those things because it seems like when we play those agents, I'm not saying they're not powerful. They're powerful as all hell, like in certain scenarios,
Yeah.
but they become readable like throughout the week, which is what I'm worried about. Like we put in all of this work on like Neon or Yoru, but we don't have the fundamentals as like a team to like move them around properly
Hmm.
and give like a flurry of different looks across all of the maps, across multiple matches. And that comes with like more server side time and more practice.
Yeah.
And ultimately, because we've just been in this gauntlet of open qualifiers and then straight into VCT, like we have had to like pick and choose which maps we want to change and like which maps we want to change things on even. So like after open qualifier 2, we obviously have more footage on us than I think any other team
Yeah.
because we did open qualifier 1 as 100 Thieves, so all of our matches are fucking streamed versus like some other teams that have like no matches streamed.
Mhm.
Like you look at some of the other teams that qualified, even though they're big names, they have no VODs. Like, but it seemed like all of our matches were streamed. which means that all of these opponents have a week to prepare, knowing exactly how we position ourselves, exactly how our defaults are run. So it's like our week has to be like, okay, we have one map we can ban. We have 6 maps in the pool. You know, like which comps do we want to change? Which comps do we want to keep the same? Which maps do we think they're going to pick? Which maps are we going to pick? Which maps should we get scrims on the most? You know, like, because you can't scrim them all
Right.
like a dozen times within a week and change everything. That's not realistic. You need to be able to react in like a countless scenarios that you can't even imagine. And you don't even know what comp the other team's going to pick half the time because they don't have VODs of, you know, like we play Exet next week. They have probably played like, I think like 4 maps so far in BCT. And it's like,
There's not a lot
there's
there.
just there's not a lot of footage, right? So it's on us to come up with like powerful openings and stuff like that that goes past their comp, and more about like our game plan for like an opponent like Exet. And we ran into that same problem with the guard. So it's not like I'm worried about it, but clearly teams playing us have more footage of us than we have of them.
Sure.
And we're a newer team. So it puts us in a weird spot where it's hard to change too much, but we also know we have to change certain aspects of our game from week to week, which is why I haven't really forced in like a Neon or a Yoru or anything like that yet, because I think that's, I want to, but it just seems crazy. Such a different play style.
Speaking of Asuna, if you go back to his really, coming out, if you will, Valorant space, he's highly touted, highly respected. I think said I can see him being the face of the game. In your eyes, having the opportunity to rebuild this roster the way that you want it,
for some reason you're cutting out right now.
Am I cutting out? Maybe a bit too low.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
You're good.
I was trying to bring the tone down, make it a bit somber.
You're good. I like it.
You had your choice of how to build the roster and who to build it around, and you chose him. You chose Asuna. In your eyes, what makes him so special?
I'm gonna just start out and say, like, I think Asuna is the best Valorant player I've ever seen. Like, he is special. Like, he understands how to instinctually use utility, more so than any other player that I watch when I watch all these VODs. Like, and he pairs it with obviously insane mechanics. Like, that the two work in tandem. Like, he can't be the best player in my eyes without having both of those things.
Sure.
But it's like when I see him on Duelist, he understands like stalling, he understands creating space, he understands zoning, he understands when he needs to take initiative, he understands when he needs to fall back. And I trust him a lot. Like, I trust him as a player a lot to make the correct decisions in chaotic moments, in moments that like you can't go over in a server, because Valorant is full of so many variables, right? Like, you don't know what comp you're going to play next scrim or next match, or like, you don't know which agent is going to be playing the site you're approaching or the choke point you're approaching. Like, the game is filled with decision making, like in the moment decision making, where you need to react properly, and you need to react properly with the person behind you or in front of you. Depends on which role you're in. Like, for Austin, if he's a duelist, he's in the front. If he's on Sky, he's like right behind. And I find he's very good at keeping spacing very good when he's like behind someone, like as a Sky or a KO. And he's really good at creating space when he's in the front. Obviously, he has a lot of experience doing that in past iterations of 100 Thieves. So I think that aspect of him makes him really good. He's really good at getting information and playing off of that information. He makes good reads with the information that he has. And I think all of those things kind of combine to make him the player he is.
Hmm.
He's also very vocal, like in the round, like, and when he dies, like he calms when he's dead, and he brings the mood of the team up. Like I think something that I've mentioned a lot, like as a broadcast talent, after I got done playing, was I got to reflect on like the past teams I was on and like what made them successful. And I think a lot of the times it gets overlooked, like the value of having someone like Asuna that can lift the mood of the team.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to come from the in-game leader, right? Like the in-game leader is the person that's going to be like factual and dry and maybe critiquing people a little bit more than everyone else.
Right.
So realistically, that's not going to be the person that lifts the mood. It needs to come from somewhere else. So you can't just have like an in-game leader and four quiet people. And I think Asuna like completes all of this stuff that I'm saying,
Hmm.
which is why he's so valuable like as a player in this game. Like he is an incredible talent. Uh Nothing else to really say. Like I'm like over the moon about him as a player.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more question about coaching, and then we're going to transition to a topic. What would you say is the biggest misconception out there about coaching today?
Ooh, the biggest misconception about coaching is probably that it just involves like, just creating strats
Lineups?
and like just like lineups and stuff. When in reality, it's like it's so much it's it's so complex compared to like what I thought, right? Like everything from, booking the scrims to picking the comps, and then you have to work with the players to see if that comp's even possible.
Hmm.
You then have to like look at the opponent's VODs to see like what they're doing and what they like playing. And you have to kind of like decide like map vetoes based on that. And then you have to like again like kind of ask the players if they're going to be comfortable on the maps that you want to play, and then you have to design like a week probably full of practice that's around this game plan, right? Like you you need to flush out 6 to 7 maps if you're going to leave open a 7 map pool, which means that like with all of these updates you have to analyze whether the agent coming into the game is good enough to change your comp, or all these nerfs and updates, are you going to change your comp with those every time? And if you do, it changes everything. Like it
Hmm.
changes every, like if you have a Sova and you switch it to Fade, like you lose a recon, you lose a drone. You do get info in other ways, but that means your teammates need to react differently. So it
Right.
changes how they react,
Right.
which then cascades into other ways, right? You need to change your XX if you change one player. Like nothing, because every piece of utility is unique in this game, it's very, very hard. And then another reason why it's not as easy as just drawing up the plays is again, you don't know what comp you're going to play.
Hmm.
So a lot of what it seems like is just every time the players go into a scenario, like you approach mm, like mid on split or something,
Hmm.
like there might be a Viper wall there. There might be
Hmm.
an Astra Star on the ground. There might
Might
be
be a
a Sage
sage
wall
wall.
there.
Yeah.
There might be there might be nothing. Like,
Hmm.
what do you do in all? There are countless scenarios in every single choke point you encounter in Valorant that if you sat there trying to go over reactions to every single scenario, you would just keep running into them over and over. And then there would be a patch and you would run into new ones over and over and over again. So, like,
Yeah.
trying to manage, like, making sure you have enough, like, power in your shots and then enough correct reactions while also like understanding rotations and timings and whether you're getting enough info and stuff on defense. I think this game is so complex. Like there are just so many layers to it. Man, there's a lot to it. And then there's obviously like one-on-ones and stuff like that. So like if I feel like a player needs like help outside of the team, like I'll do like one-on-ones with certain players on the team. And then there's like VOD breakdowns. So like after we lose a match, like match to TSM, we'll do a VOD breakdown of the matches we lost. If we're gonna play a team, we might VOD review them ahead of time.
Hmm.
Um, there's so many different areas that I feel like people are kind of oblivious to when it comes to coaching in Valorant. Uh, I wish it was just like drawing up plays and as easy as that, but it doesn't end up being that easy because of all of the different variables you encounter.
Mm.
Like it's not as easy as just drawing something up and like execing, because you'll get stalled out and then the other team is going to get map control and then they're going to know where you are, and that's going to make your hit like triple as hard as what you initially drew it up to be.
Well, and you've
Uh,
lost utility, so I mean, it's
and you've
not
lost
signature.
utility. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like it's all a balance. It's been like a learning process for me too. Um, it's hard to explain, but there's a lot that goes into it, and it's just not it's not as simple as what a lot of people probably think is what
Yep.
I'm gonna say.
Well, and even to some of the permutations and possibilities that it sounds like it would just not be an efficient use of time to single
Yeah,
time. No way to effectively do that. So, no, I
yeah.
think that's a valid shout for sure.
That's the thing is, I feel like all of these things are great uses of the time, but you only have a certain amount of time in the week, right? And that's kind of like what we're running into, right?
Yeah.
Is we have like 2 hours of server side time every day. We do like 4 scrims. We wind down talk, and our days are feel like really fucking long by the end because we don't have
Yep.
any breaks in between.
And they go
Um,
quick. Yeah.
and then they go really quick. Yeah.
Yep.
And you need the scrims to get the reps in for
Mhm.
all of these reactions, but you also need the server side time in to prepare the strats that you're going to do during those scrims.
Mhm.
But then you also want to VOD review and you want to do these individual time with each other, and you want to find lineups for people that are unique and win rounds. And like, there's so many aspects of this that I feel like, oh man, if we had like an off season right now, I feel like we could get so much better. But
Yep.
we just have to keep like patching things up as we move along right now, and that's why I'm just asking people to just be patient with us. But
Yep.
I know we can deliver results like despite all of this.
It's funny that because something just clicked in my mind. Um, you mentioned there are so many different things that can be done and need to be done. Sean, in a lot of ways, there are some really interesting parallels to commentary in the sense that if you think about this from a color caster, right? Put your casting hat back on. You think about a round. You've got a minute and 40 seconds, and you have probably 36,000 different things to talk about, and you have time to
Yeah.
talk about 5 of them. So you're going through this decision making process where you go, what's the most important thing? What to bring value to in that moment to tell the story of the round, right? And as to draw the parallel to, there's a lot of different things to talk about. There are a lot of different things to do, and just not a lot of time to do them all or
Yeah.
to prepare for them all. Those things, which leads me to the question that I have for you: do you miss commentary?
Oh, dude, I definitely miss commentary. It's not like I ever hated commentating games. Like there is something that will always be inside me about like telling stories and just
Mm.
yeah, the aspect of like basically teaching. Like that's what brought me into like coaching, right? It's another form of like teaching and like kind of like telling a story and
Yeah.
trying to get people to see through like your perspective. Um, I loved commentating. I love like after the games, with Dan like going to the match thread and reading the comments and like a lot of the narratives that Dan and I had spun
Mm.
were like the top comments on the match thread. Like that would tell me that I think we did a good job of telling the story, because almost everything that we were bringing up were in those comments. And like some nerd didn't like think through something that we didn't bring up. So I loved that. Like I fucking loved that shit. And then just like drawing attention to like quirky stuff. And I also felt like I could learn more. Like
Mm.
that was one aspect about commentating that I thought was really cool, because um obviously with coaching I don't have as much time to like watch as many games as I did when
Right.
I like commentated and when I streamed, which is ironic because I wish I did have that time. Like I was able to like you get more creative like the more you watch these like ideas flow from
Mhm.
other teams and in all these regions, So I really like that too when I commentated, just seeing all the creativity in the game, and how people like. I know the thought, like the amount of time that it takes for someone like I think Potter showed that thing where that Reform did with the Sage Wall, where he put
Yeah.
like
On Icebox.
he
Yeah.
yeah, he boosted Sick up as Sick went to go plant, and she said like they had to dry run that
They
to
were
make sure it
drilling that
worked, and
for
I was just
knows how
like
long. Yeah.
that's what I envision. Like every time a play like that happens, I'm like, okay, that's not just some guy making an individual play. That's some shit that like had to be talked about for probably like an hour in a server just to win like one round in a quirky way. Like, oh, it's crazy, but like that's the insight that I feel like the casual fan doesn't really have in Valorant yet.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was really cool to tell them that as a caster. And I don't think that'll ever go away. Like I love casting. Yeah, I definitely miss it to an extent. Yeah,
Well,
for
I
sure.
miss you too.
Oh, I don't
Listen.
miss you. I miss casting. What the fuck?
Oh, right. Well, with that, um, you've done both. You've done commentary and you've done coaching. Here's a fun question for you. What would you say is the biggest thing that is missing from Valorant commentary right now?
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Missing from Valorant commentary.
Yeah.
Um, man, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. Look, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know the answer to that question.
That's it.
I
I
don't know.
mean,
What do
that
you
seat's
think?
getting
Give me
warm.
some ideas. Give me some ideas. I could expand on.
I'm not gonna give you
I
the
honestly,
ideas.
I'm actually trying to think. Like, it's it's hard.
Yeah, is it the storytelling? Is it the hero building? Is it the attention to nuance and things like um more of a focus on conditioning? Like, did you clear out the alarm bot mid on ascent? If yes, what does that
Yeah,
mean for the defending team versus not? Like, there's so many different things as you know that go into this. And I was just
yeah,
curious to see if now that you're on the other side of it, you're honestly, Sean, in a lot of ways, the perspective is different too because now you've got skin in the game, right? Like,
yeah,
as casting your match against TSM, I'm talking about you, right? Like, I'm talking about your
yeah,
team, uh, and I can totally see how there would be a way to hear something that a commentator says and says, well, that obviously you can disagree with it or agree with it or having a different opinion on it, what have you, because your skin is in the game now, right? Like your perspective on it
yeah.
changes.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Um. Okay. So I guess something I guess we could see from commentators moving forward is just in it's weird. It's so hard in Valorant compared to Counter-Strike, and this is something that I talked to a lot with Dan about, and even some of the devs. Is in Counter-Strike you could kind of like you can showcase your personality more as a caster, and you can fall into a formula of casting. Uh, and that's because of how freeze time operates. In my opinion,
Yeah, we've
it's
talked about
it's because of how freeze time operates in Counter-Strike, where you have like 20 seconds where the players are just in spawn and they're not going up to barriers, right? Oh, Jesus. They're not like running up to places. There's not all kind of things that you can predict, right? Whereas in Valorant as a caster, the freeze time is so important because if Sova spawns on defense and heads towards A on Haven, you can talk about that in a very different way than if, Sova spawns and goes C on Haven and he has his like ult already. Like,
right.
it takes away that decompression time that you get in CS. And it feels like a lot when I listen to a Valorant cast, it's like, fuck it, you're just redlining it like the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
it's just this high pace thing that's just always moving at like full speed, right? Because even on the eco rounds, there's like a fucking jet blade storm, there's chamber headhunters, there's
There's set
chamber ops,
pieces. Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
fucking set. Yeah, like even an eco round isn't an eco round
Mhm.
in Valorant. So like those decompression times that CS casters get to like kind of jive with the viewer and have fun, they don't exist really in Valorant. And they could exist. You might say, like, well, you could still do that, Sean. And my counter argument to that would be, okay, you can still do that, but what's going to inevitably happen is insane plays are going to happen while you're fucking around as a caster,
Yep.
and you will get reamed for it. Like it's like indefensible. Like imagine if, like someone were casting like the guard versus us in that game on Fracture, and they start like dicking around a little bit when side player's in that like 1-on-4, and he almost
Mhm.
wins the 1-on-4.
Mhm.
Like, and what if he did win the 1-on-4 and you're dicking around? Like, you completely shit on that guy's clutch. All the co-streamers then shit on you, and the community shits on you, and you're less inclined to do that again in the future. So
Yep.
all roads head towards you taking that situation seriously, whether you like it or not. Like, that's
Well,
just how you have to operate as a caster in this game.
well, and the funny thing is, you take a look at that circumstance and you take the other side of it and you go, okay, Sai is in a 1v4. Statistically speaking, is he going to win this? Probably not. But if you introduce an element of like seriousness to it and a possibility of what if, the other side of the
Yeah.
coin is there too, where they go, he's not going to win 1v4. Why is this caster taking this so seriously? He sounds so
Yeah.
stupid, blah, blah, blah. Like, there, in a lot of ways, in the scenario that you just painted, there was no winning.
Yeah. Yeah, there really isn't a lot of winning sometimes when you're like casting those scenarios. My method was always like be as realistic as possible. Like
Yep.
use my experiences to be like, if I don't think something's likely, I'm gonna say it's not likely.
Yep.
I'm not gonna like dismiss it and kind of go on to the next round or something. But like if someone's in this scenario that is like less than 20% chance of succession in my head, I'll kind of like ease out of it and change my tone a little bit. And it kind of draws more importance when it does happen. But you have to be ready to pivot off of your point, right? Like you can't sit there and dick around. Like you still have to pay full attention to the game even while you're dicking around a little bit, like and kind of like drawing attention away from the play. In Valorant, it's super hard to explain.
It's a
Um,
delicate balance.
it is. It's hard. I'm sure you recognize this too as like a caster. Like there's not many moments of downtime
Mm.
in Valorant. Like the freeze time, you can talk about how teams are setting up. The round starts. Usually you get like initiator utility, like right off the rip. You could talk about how like a sentinel is set up. Meanwhile, like a duelist is probably like making a play. So like choose what you want to talk about
Yep.
now. And so then you have like the first engagement. And the way Dan and I typically operated was like I would take the freeze time. So like I would basically use the freeze time to set the scene. This was Dan and I's formula. And I don't think like a lot of casters that have like formulas like this, but our formula was I would discuss broad macro picture freeze time. Dan would take play by play at the start of the round. So he'd be like, all right, here we have like Optic setting up for their shower stake, like Victor's double satcheling in, and the first skirmish happens, right? Like in the round. And Dan would cast through the skirmish as play by play, and then the teams would reset. And the pro level teams usually reset. I would take it back. But it takes like an immense amount of experience to be able to do that, to be able to know that the fight has died down, to be able to like look at the mini map and be like, okay, they're gonna stop contesting now. There's no way that they can contest anymore. So now I can take back like the casting and go back into color and be like, okay, look, this is how Cloud9 has reacted to that shower stake. They now have 3 people over towards this A site, but look at this, Dan. Like Optic is now rolling back to B, and like they're setting up for the B take. Oh, but look at this. Like Leaf is pushing down long for early info, and Dan will like take that from me because he knows the fight is about to happen, and he casts the play-by-play, the fights. So like we like seamlessly hand off there, and like he casts through however long the fight happens. If the round breaks down again, I'll take it back. If it doesn't break down, the round ends. I try to put like a nice little bow on it, like this is what happened, and like these are the shots that happened, and this is why this team won and this team lost, and then we repeat again next round, right?
Yeah.
But there's never any downtime like there is in CS:GO
Yeah.
to talk about fucking aliens or like hookers in Vegas, you know, like whatever Anders wants to talk about, you know, like that doesn't exist in Valorant is what I'm saying.
Sure. Sean, last question I have for you. Anything you want to say to your fan base?
Man, dude, like I feel so bad because built this awesome community and streamed for like a couple years now in Valorant, had like the Discord running, had the YouTube up, was TikToking my life away, you know? And I've just been so consumed with everything since joining 100 Thieves. It's been crazy. And uh yeah, I mean, obviously I have kids too, so I'm trying to balance everything, and I love my fans so much and I love them for the support. I'll occasionally like hop in Discord and like be like, yo, I miss you guys so much. But they send me some like super encouraging messages, and I just want to thank everyone for like the constant support, man. It's been truly amazing since joining 100 Thieves.
You guys have a big matchup against XSET here this coming weekend. Best of luck to you on that. And again, thank you so much for joining the show. Friends watching, if you have feedback, please drop it in the comments below. And then as always, if you like the content, and I know you do, I mean, Sean, go ahead, comment, like, subscribe, all of the things that you need to do so we can continue to put the show on. But that's going to do it for episode 12 of Vandals. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.